Uh, Good evening, Rochester. On behalf of the Board of Education, welcome. Today is May the 25th, 2020. It's a wonderful day outside. Personally, I don't know about my colleagues, but I hope that you all had an opportunity to enjoy the weather. I spent it out in the backyard of my law office, pruning, seriously, cutting down a tree. And I'm glad to say I survived it. I hope you all out there had a good evening. I know my colleagues on the board hope that as well, and hope that the balance of your evening is just as prosperous and safe and successful. We have a bit of an agenda today. I told one of my colleagues, Vice President Elliott, that we would try to move the agenda along because there's something very important happening in the community, and we think everybody in the city of Rochester should have the opportunity to participate, at least watch. There's going to be a mayoral debate tonight. So I would ask my colleagues to do what I'm not doing right now, which is to be as brief as you can so that we can end this meeting, not because we don't care about district business, but we want to make sure that we see this very important debate that's going to be aired tonight. I think it's is it 7 o'clock? Is it 8? 7, Vice President Elliott? Yep. All right, so let's get to it. The first order of business, though, that we have to take care of, and I've called this meeting to order. You all know, my colleagues know, our rules are which are defined in our bylaws. It's just going to happen that board members are not going to be able to make every meeting. The rules say that if you can't make a meeting, you have to inform the board president, and then that is followed by the board president making an assessment as to whether it's a legitimate excuse or not. And then ultimately, though, the full board decides whether it's a legitimate excuse or not. I received a call from, I didn't receive a call, I became informed that Commissioner LeBron is not able to make today's meeting. She has another work obligation. I would just say this,
President White, excuse me, Commissioner LeBron did join us and her hand is raised. I'm sorry for interrupting.
Okay, Commissioner LeBron, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I did, because I have to work today, and I did email the board vice president because I saw an email. I didn't think you were going to be here tonight. So I did inform board staff, the superintendent, and the board vice president. So I'm working. I have a Zoom convening that my organization is hosting tonight until 8 o'clock. If I'm done and you are all still in the meeting, I'll jump back on. If not, I won't be able to make it. So I just wanted to come and on the record myself, explain to you all and the public especially why I will not be attending tonight. Thank you.
As I was saying, thank you, Commissioner LeBron. Our rules require, I didn't make the rules. They were made by a group of people, that is the Board of Education. They require that the contact be made with the board president, whoever that is, and provide an explanation. I'm glad that I did have the opportunity to speak to Commissioner LeBron. I would say to Commissioner LeBron and to all of my colleagues who all appreciate this, we're juggling multiple tasks, not only multiple jobs, this one, but most of us have outside employment as well. We also have families to raise, and I appreciate and respect that. All I ask while I am president is that you contact me consistent with the rules, have the conversation with me, whatever it is, and then I will always, I swear to you, that I will do my best to make sure that you are treated justly and fairly in terms of assessing your multiple obligations. The rules are pretty simple. Just call me, talk to me. And I'm just saying me, because right now I'm the board president, but next year it'll most certainly be somebody else. And you should do the same thing there to follow the rules. But I'm very glad that I had the opportunity to hear what Commissioner LeBron had to say. I was not included in that email. I'm not sure why. It probably was some mistake in terms of how we do email. Sometimes, you group chat people and stuff like that. I'm sure it was an innocent mistake. I did not receive notice directly from Commissioner LeBron, but let me say, having heard her tonight, I believe that a board president should have flexibility when people have outstanding and significant employment obligations, which, by the way, help us perform our job. Most of us are employed in fields that make those experiences valuable to what we do as board members. And our rules say, so long as you don't miss 3 consecutive meetings, you're in a good place here. So as I'm making the assessment that Commissioner LeBron's excuse for not being here today, now having heard it, is a legitimate one. She is gainfully employed. She does things to help make the community better. She's doing that tonight. And so I'm making the assessment that the excuse is legitimate. Is there any objection to my determination? I'm going to look at my participant screen. I don't see any hands being raised. And so, Madam Clerk, I shouldn't say Madam Clerk, I have to take care of that business first. The excuse provided by Commissioner LeBron will be deemed legitimate. And again, I would remind my colleagues and anybody watching, the only time someone really gets themselves in trouble here is if you have 3 consecutive unexcused absences. So I know that has never happened that I'm aware of and won't happen in the future. So I need to do something else, which is to receive a motion from one of my colleagues, since one of our team members, Kaya Wade, our clerk, is on a legitimately well-deserved vacation. We need to have a temporary clerk appointed for the purpose of recording business, like Commissioner LeBron's legitimate absence tonight. So I need a motion from one of my colleagues to appoint Anissa Henry Wheeler as temporary clerk. Thank you, Commissioner Malloy. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Clark. All those in favor of appointing Anissa Henry Wheeler as generally our Auditor General, but tonight our clerk, please indicate by making sure your monitor's on and saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? All right, the ayes have it. Okay. All right, let's move this meeting along. I am told by our staff that there are no speakers tonight. Is that correct, Madam Clerk? You're muted.
That is correct.
And also, did you record or will you record the vote regarding Commissioner LeBron's legitimate absence for me?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
You very much. First item on our agenda is a special meeting discussion regarding summer school. I used to hate to hear that word, but it is actually a good opportunity for our students. I think we're going to get a report from the administration, and we're not going to hear from the superintendent. We're going to hear from, is it Dr. Black?
Yes, Dr. Black.
All right, Dr. Black, this floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. I am coming to provide a brief update on our RCSD summer programs, and then I'll take some questions. So next slide. So summer programming, i.e. summer school, has been a hotbed issue in that we're thinking about how to address learning loss as a result of our most recent circumstances. And so for our summer programming for 2021, we are building a program comprehensively that deals with making up coursework, addresses unfinished learning, providing targeted supports, and providing experiences to accelerate learning opportunities across our district. Next slide. When we came to you in March, we shared that we had started a summer school program that was going to serve approximately 750 students. As a result of feedback from our constituency, encouragement from our superintendent, we have updated to have our summer programs not only include summer school offerings as traditional, but also to think about how we provide expanded learning opportunities and access to our city resources. We are working to ensure that all of the technology platforms that students are able to access during the school year are available through the summer, and are going to put together some initiatives to encourage additional student use. And then we are working to connect with our external partnerships and programs across the city to create a bridge of sorts so that we can provide knowledge and information to our students around the other things that are available to us across the city in terms of summer offerings. Next slide.
Commissioner Malloy had her hand raised. Did you want to answer questions throughout or at the end?
It's a preemptive hand, so it's just, I do have questions. I'll wait till the end. That's fine.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Next slide. So this may feel a little bit different than in previous years for summer programs and or summer school. In our previous practices, summer school was usually the mechanism by which students came to us to do a lot of makeup work that they either didn't attend to or didn't access during the school year. We also had partnerships with diverse organizations across the summer with varying quality, serving a very small subset of our population. For this summer in particular, so summer 2020, We are responding to our feedback offered to us in our monitors plan about really thinking about summer programming and summer school in a much more comprehensive way to address the varying needs that have come about as a result of our pandemic and the result of just what we know about summer access, summer information. We are actually expanding the types of programs that we're offering this summer from RCSD to really think about quality control and access. So what do we do well? And then how do we replicate it in future summers? We will notice that there's a reduction in overall seats from previous years to just, again, really think about how we target and quality control programming. And we're having limited engagement this summer with our CBOs, with not providing a partnership fee, not providing transportation this summer, and not providing facilities use, but really thinking about how we steer our students into partnerships that are existing in the greater community. We are looking to do this for summer 2021, so next summer, to really ramp up and build a robust summer program that allows students to have remediation, acceleration, and a variety of experiences. We're really thinking about even now, what does engagement and enrichment look like for summer? How do we build comprehensive programming that attends to arts needs, athletic needs, academic needs, exposure and access needs? We are already building the structures to re-engage our partnerships and our CBOs who have previously provided programming and providing some gateway opportunities for new CBOs to come online. And we're going to be adding back the idea of how do we provide work-based opportunities for our students. And that's, again, this summer we're shrinking a little bit to then be very expansive in summer 21. Next slide. But for this year, I want to just highlight what's being offered across the district. And so you'll see there are 3 separate buckets with sites being listed. We have our centralized programs, which is a draw from all over the city. We have our schools in receivership. So each receivership school in our district have the opportunity to provide a targeted summer experience for the students within those schools. And then we have our specialized programs, which are drawing upon groups around language, our ESY, our specialized populations. So comprehensively across the district, we have a wide variety of offerings for our students to attend to. Next slide. So our current numbers. Like when we came together in March, we shared that we were at 750 seats. And as I've mentioned, we've added seats continuously. Our total number of seats being offered in summer programs across RCSD right now stands at 3,540 seats. As you can see, about 15,000 of those seats, 1,500 of those seats are schools in receivership. About 1,300, if you wrap up, to 1,400 are our centralized programs, and about 500 or so kids are in our specialized program, to a grand total of 3,000, let me read numbers correctly, 540 seats across our district offerings. Next slide, please. For information, registration for our centralized elementary programs is supposed to close today. Based on our numbers, we'll be extending that for a few days. Our registration for MBK closes on March 31st. And as of 5/21, we had 595 students registered. As of today, that number is up to 1,400 students registered. So we've had an increase in registration over the weekend and up until today. We need to fill as many of our seats as possible. And so we're going to extend some time to make sure that we capture as many eligible students as we have seats for. Next slide. I'd be remiss if I didn't lift up staffing as a constraint or a consideration for the summer. Our receivership programs are fully staffed, and that means that we have our administration and our teachers in place. For our centralized programs, we're still taking and looking for willing and ready applicants who want to come and join us for our summer programs and experiences. Currently, we still need 2 assistant principals. We still need some clerical staff, and we probably will have a need for additional elementary teachers and some with some science background. But I want to put that on the record that we are still in need of staff to staff our currently allocated seats. Next slide, please. Next steps. So yay, we're going to finalize all student registration and look for more students so that we can plan for food service, transportation, schedules. And then I'm going to share with the board and just inform and hope that you all will be amenable that because of summer planning and the way that staffing is falling out and allocations are rolling out, that we will probably be coming to you with additional resolutions to support summer programming and professional development that are a little bit off cycle, with the consideration that you all will support those efforts. And in a nutshell, that is summer programming. So I saw Commissioner Malloy's hand up first. No, I'm sorry, I saw her hand. I don't know if she was first, but I know she has a question.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for your work on this, and thank you for the presentation tonight. I actually have about 5 questions, so I'm happy to ask one and then just wait for other people to give them a chance or an opportunity. Maybe some of their questions will piggyback on this one. I think my first question, though, is just in terms of how did you make these projections? What criteria did you use to reach the seat number of 3,540? How did you determine, was it through course failures? Was it state, or was it scoring, state test scores, need for remediation? How do we know that this is the actual need? That's the first question.
Sure. So I'll start with that one. So the determination for available seats came from a variety of factors. Like I shared in our March morning, we started with 750 students, which was going to be predominantly our high school students for course failures and course recovery, through hearing that we need to also attend to acceleration, transition, our language babies, our ESY. We continue to add seats, taking consideration of the program availability and what we've learned from previous years. And so in previous data, we know that we've offered a lot of seats with not a lot of output and not a lot of result. And so for the quality control aspect and for making sure that we can look at our specialized populations, we whittled the seats down. Our 750 for our high school still remains. So our centralized high school started where it is, but we were able to add additional opportunities for secondary. And initially we had no elementary outside our receiverships and added the additional seats for centralized elementary.
Is there any chance that number will need to grow if more students are identified?
So at this point, it's there's always a possibility, although very unlikely, and for 2 factors. A, while our enrollment has jumped significantly in the last couple of days, we are watching to see what seats get filled. And B, the staffing need is great. And so what I do not want to do is offer open more seats if I can't actually guarantee that I can have quality staffing and quality program to offer. And so at this point, we're going to hold at the numbers we are. If a lot of children fall out of the woodwork and we can staff, then that's a different conversation. But right now our trends are saying what we've allocated and what we can staff for are pretty on par.
Okay, and then I guess the timeline that I saw on there, it looks like today was one of the due dates for receivership schools. And we're quickly approaching that second due date.
Yep.
Is there any leeway on any of that?
So our leeway is as follows. So we had the closeout today, but because we're not fully enrolled at our elementary seats, we're going to continue to take registrations. There's some reach out from our team to the schools impacted to figure out if students have been identified or what supports we can offer. And then the additional registrations for secondary haven't actually began yet. So as we shake out our 4th quarter grades and our 4th quarter needs, that will influence the finalization of courses, which will then influence the babies that we say, hey, this is an opportunity for you to either accelerate or make sure that we close the gap for you.
And then where might I find the information for the funding for this program? So for instance, how much is this going to cost us as a district? Does this go under the 2021 budget or the 21-22? How are we paying for it? What are the actual costs? How many, the overall cost, and where are those funds coming from?
So the funds are coming from our 2021 budget, and mostly from title funds, and the accompanying executive summary will show when you get your additional resolutions that will outline all of the funding for summer programming for you.
Okay, and which budget lines those are coming from and all of those things?
Yep, so we'll put it on the question log, and I'll make sure that on the executive summary that we provide back to you all of those details are outlined explicitly.
Okay, and then finally, transportation is fully provided for the summer programming?
Yes.
All right, and then actually I have 2 questions, but I was wondering, I guess you'll outline probably how that's funded as well in the executive summary that we get,
Yes.
just broken down by, the costs by category, perhaps, like for the, administrative costs, the instructional costs, and then maybe transportation costs. I guess the final question I have is, so obviously we're using RCSD employees to staff this program. Is it fully staffed by our current employees?
Yes. So all of our hiring thus far has been from within our CSD as a community.
Okay. And can you think of maybe a reason why we might not have those positions filled yet?
So we're doing some root cause analysis. I think there's a number of things. I think in terms of fatigue and the combination of fatigue and newfound freedom that we can experience this summer. I think people genuinely are wondering what the best fit for their summer is, and the summer might not be summer programming, and that's okay. I think that we are going to do just a little bit more of outreach to see who we can gather in the net, and then go from there.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Are there any other questions? I'm looking at the list, and on mine, it doesn't show any hands being raised. And there being no comments, I assume that Dr. Black, you've...
Mr. President, just when does summer school start?
So we have a rolling start. Some programs will start on July 6th, and some will start the following week.
All right, thank you.
And we have programs that go for 20 days, Commissioner Elliott, and 29 days respectively across the summer.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Black, I have been through many summer school beginnings, and a number of them have been very productive. We've reduced the summer slide, as some would say. We've given folks an opportunity that they might not have had to graduate in August. Our August graduation rates have gone up significantly because prior administrations have sought to make this opportunity available to our students. And that, in fact, has made parents and loved ones happy. Before, we never even celebrated August graduations until about, I would say, maybe about 8 years ago. So we're blessed to have made some progress in this area. But I must say, in all the years that I've had the opportunity to work with various administrations who worked hard on making this resource available, I feel going into this one, it's organized in a way that really maximizes this opportunity for students. So I want to thank you in particular, because you're new to this district and you just literally hit the ground running on a very important sacred ground of summer education. So thank you on behalf of the board. I want to thank you for your effort to have us organized and ready. And I know the families and people of Rochester, thank you for that effort. I know all this is done under your boss, Leslie Myers, but I wanted, on behalf of the board, I want to thank you for your organizational abilities and your focus in making this critical opportunity available to our students. So thank you.
Thank you.
Before Commissioner Clark, I hand over the gavel to you, sort of a good segue off the subject of summer school and Dr. Black's participation is a reference to our superintendent. She is not here today. I'm sure some of folks out there may wonder, where's Dr. Leslie Myers-Small? Well, she's at the RBJ's annual Circle of Excellence Award Ceremony. This award ceremony is given to a leader in Rochester who has a longstanding commitment to community change, and also a leader who is leading the way for women in the Rochester and Monroe County area. Obviously, this Board of Education understood in advance of even RBJ the significance that role that Leslie has played in making our community better for decades now. And it goes back many years to the point where she was a teacher in the district and then an administrator. But you all know that she went out to Brockport, made significant changes and made an impact in the lives of others there. And now here she is. And then, of course, she went to the state of New York, and now here she is sharing her talents, her ability, and most importantly, her commitment to the Rochester community, which has never wavered. So I wanted to, one, explain to people, not my colleagues, because they knew, but I wanted to explain to people watching why Leslie is not here today. But if you ever wanted a legitimate excuse for not being at a board meeting, Leslie has it today. She's being honored and recognized for her good work for all people, but particularly for leading the way for women in the Rochester and Greater Monroe County area. So on behalf of the Board of Education, congratulations, Dr. Leslie Myers-Small, for the recognition, the well-deserved recognition that you are receiving this evening. Okay, the other thing that I wanted to say before I hand over the gavel to you, Commissioner Clark, is that today is a day that some might reflect upon as very difficult. It is the 1-year anniversary of the killing of George Floyd. There's nothing that any one of us could say to those out there listening that would make this moment any more bitter than it already is. But there is a sweet part of this, and I know that George Floyd is looking at the change that has ensued as a result of his tragic and brutal killing. There is a movement in this country, long delayed. We don't know that it will get us where we need to be, but there is clearly movement in this country in the right direction as a consequence of his horrific killing. Somewhat similar to what we saw as a nation when Emmett Till was killed. This nation, thankfully, Emmett's mom forced this nation to look at how they were treating not just how they treated her son, but how they were treating all people of color. And the nation moved a bit. And as a matter of fact, if you were to speak to Rosa Parks right now, she would tell you her decision to not give up her seat was in part a reflection of her having seen the burnt, destroyed body of Emmett Till. So while we, all of us, anguish over the loss of George Floyd and what he meant to his family, we also know that his passing does, in some significant, ironic way, have positive meaning for our nation. So on behalf of the entire Board of Education, we recognize the significance of his passing because what it meant to our nation and what it might mean for our future. All right, Commissioner Clark, the gavel is yours.
Thank you, President White. I'd like to call the Audit Committee to order. And with that, I would like to request a motion to approve the minutes from our March 23rd, 2021 meeting.
Motion.
Second?
Second.
Okay, great. All in favor? Aye.
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 Great. Okay, the motion carried. And if you recall, at our March 21st meeting, we had the auditors there from Freed Maxick, and they were substantially complete with our single audit, but there was one item that they were waiting on, and that was our special education maintenance of effort. But I'm pleased to report that Ms. Wheeler did get that report in, and and as a result of that, our 2020 audit is now complete, closed with the highest opinion that the district can receive, an unmodified opinion. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to our Auditor General, Ms. Henry Wheeler, so that she can go through the single audit results.
Thank you. As you recall then, at the last meeting, we did talk a little bit about the two areas that were reviewed under single audit. In this particular case, it was the lunch fund or the child program, as well as special education. So the challenge with that was we were able to get through the lunch fund, but as far as the special education area, we did have some challenges. I just wanted to bring to your attention a little bit of information in here that you wanted to see or in those documents. I highlighted this point because I think it is pretty much the key point in which you should be looking for on this particular page, where they have their opinion, the fact that we complied in all material respects. That is a key point. We were at risk at the timing of their last review with us because we had some difficulty. There was approximately a $7 million gap between the expenditures for special education between 1920 and the 18-19 year. A couple other points I highlighted for emphasis only, just so that in the documents you received, these are the key points you should be looking for when you see a single audit report. You did note there were no deficiencies identified in internal control. There were no material weaknesses. So that is another point that is noteworthy and very important. And then one more time, the final opinion that our schedule of expenditures were fairly stated. So at the end of the day, we have this schedule of federal expenditures and awards that would have appeared within the documents received. It notes all of the federal pass-through and direct funding that we do receive. And I just wanted to make sure amongst all of these, they did do a test of percentage. I believe it was approximately 40% is what she stated. The special education cluster being 9.7 million was one area reviewed. And then the other area being child nutrition, or $16.1 million. So I did want to make sure, sometimes you look at the documents that auditors give you and you're like, this is really nice, and it's kind of blurry as you're going through the pages, not really sure what you're looking for. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. A nice part of the single audit is on the last page. It's truly a summary of the auditor's results. And this is really, if you looked at nothing else, you can look and see that you got an unmodified opinion. Modified would be bad. And then the fact that when they asked about material weaknesses or deficiencies, those are no's. There was no non-compliance, and we had no issues with material weaknesses or deficiencies. So I just want to make sure that that's clear to the board. Very pleased I was able to come up with $7 million in the exceptions in order for the approval. The state did approve that, and we are all set. Commissioner Elliott, Vice President, I see you have a question. And you are mute.
So, Anissa, can you explain the process of pass-through? What does that mean? And explain what that is from the beginning to the end of that for our audience and for us as a board. Exactly how does that pass-through process work?
So these federal funds, so under IDEA in particular, these federal funds are earmarked for students with disabilities. And under the IDEA, so it's federal regulations that have identified how the spending would take place, they're passing it to New York State, and we're receiving it from New York State, though it's federal funding. So it's a pass-through because federal did not directly give it to us, we received it through the state. So when we do our IDEA, or when we did this maintenance of effort work, when I was trying to figure out the exemptions and hoping there was some sort of waiver so we did not have to comply with the spending requirement, I actually ended up calling the federal government special education department saying, did you guys issue a waiver as it relates to this guidance? There was none. They said, see what people are doing at the state level. I also reached out at the state level, who handles the local or our compliance fees. And they were the people who would have had to receive all of the exemptions we had presented and accept the exclusions that were put through for us to pass single audit and remain a lowest auditee. Does that answer your question, Vice President Elliott?
It does for that, but we tend to get responses from the administration with regard to specific vendors that this money is passing through to, you know, vendor A, vendor B, vendor C. And I'm under the impression that somehow that money was granted for a particular program. So for example, I believe I've heard in the past, and I'm using this as an example, that this money was received, but it went to, let's just say, Center for Youth. So it just goes through, pass through. That's what I'm thinking. I had a different, I didn't expect the answer that you gave for this, but I mean, I accept the answer, but I was thinking that it was something different when we've looked at other resolutions in the past. So I'll talk about that at another time.
Okay, but okay, so in this case, and for what we're auditing, we're really mainly looking at federal funds that we receive.
Yeah, I get that.
However, there are times where the district will receive funds for a purpose, and we need to then give those funds to other. A good example of that is charter schools. we receive funding for charter schools, and we have to pay to charter schools, but yet we have some level of accountability for those funds because we're dispersing those funds.
Mhm.
So is that the level of pass-through you had in mind, in a sense, that type of thing where the district has received funds and it's for, say, a local agency or some local organization where we're dispersing to them? Is that what you were referring to?
Yeah, and I wanted to know more of the process, but I'll put it in the question log. I don't want to take up more time with this.
No
Thank you.
problem. Okay. So that, for the most part, is great. That pretty much concludes the single audit work that had to happen for 2020. We actually are pretty close to the timing for the single audit work to happen along with the financial audit, which is why Catherine Barrett came to you at the Finance Committee last Tuesday night. She would have normally have been with us, but it's her anniversary, so she's not here tonight. So half of our agenda was actually tagged on to the Finance Committee agenda to cover the audit plan for the upcoming year. But I did want to make sure you are aware that this audit is starting again. I am concerned slightly about the fact that for this year, with the pandemic and schools not being open, I'm very concerned about how the spending will come out this year as it relates to maintenance of effort for this upcoming year. I would anticipate it's going to affect all districts. But to date, when I did send a communication out and try to confirm whether or not there was a waiver this year for spending, I was told that there is no waiver for this year. So I'm truly hoping that our spending will come in close and we won't be in a circumstance again as we were this last time. It may not be as small as in the prior year. So that would be the point. Now, I know since this is the ultimate final report, Commissioner Clark, would you like to request a motion to accept the single audit?
Yes, and first I want to congratulate you because I know how hard you worked to come up with that $7 million for the maintenance of effort. Outstanding job. And with that, I'll accept a motion to accept the single
So
audit.
moved.
Approved. Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
So we have one opposed. Well, so the motion carries. Thanks.
Okay, so moving on, I know I gave you an update on the maintenance of effort. That work has been completed. And so I would like to share with you, I thought the easiest way for the report that you received for us to get through the content was to actually just kind of walk through. I made some slides just to talk through the report that you received, because I thought it might be the easiest way to kind of walk through this information. So at this point, it was a labor relations audit. I know they have since changed their name to staffing relations, but I did want to share with you what happened in this particular audit. Our scope of work, again, was looking back 5 years to see what would happen. Both the monitor had requested the 5-year review as well as the board within the audit plan. Our intended outcome was to improve operating protocols and procedures for MOUs, MOAs, or union agreements to make sure we had awareness of the committed financial obligations and to establish and then estimate the cost of executed agreements from a budgetary standpoint. That was also important. And to increase Board of Education visibility of the agreements. Our approach was to get the copies that the state monitor had already requested from the legal department. We requested also agreements from the union leaders and had the CBAs that were in place and decided to look at those. We met with the Senior Director of Staff Relations, General Counsel, HR, just to make sure we had an understanding of existing processes. This chart clearly shows the 211 MOUs and MOAs we received. A few of the items were kind of grievance related and some clarity, but we tried to identify things that were no financial impact, multi-year, one-time, et cetera, in the scope of the items we received. There were some subsequent operating changes. The leadership team, the current leadership team is working really hard, and a good caveat is the fact that this review is pretty historical. So the current team was not in place when many of these things took place. And so I want to make sure that the improvements that have already started or the changes that have already started are acknowledged here. There's now a cross-functional leadership team that's established. It was established at the beginning of the year. And so the whole group from a number of different perspectives are sitting together and talking from a legal and a labor type issue. So it's really great that, staff relations and finance, et cetera, is all participating and sitting at the table. They also had a change where staff relations reports to human capital instead of legal. Previously, it was called labor relations, and now it's staff relations. The first recommendation, and we spoke a little bit about this, is to make sure that there is board policies or protocols to establish criteria for our board involvement. The important thing about this is to have greater clarity and for the criteria. Dr. Miller and I were speaking about this, and really we know that there was a desire for Vice President Elliott and Commissioner LeBron to work and support this area. We really think it will be most helpful to the board if we can compile data and give you some information so that there's a menu of choices to help facilitate the request of what it is that the board would like to see so that you don't have a blank sheet. So we will be working together to try to get and gather information for you so that there can be collaboration with the Human Resources Committee and final resolution can be determined by the board as to what type of criteria would like to be used in this particular area for board visibility. The next area is dealing with protocols and procedures. We really want to make sure there are practices that have been in place. We're really looking for protocols and procedures so that it's formalized, it's consistent, it's written. So when there's transition, there's no confusion. When everything can happen the same if there's any turnover, and that's always a critical thing for it to happen within the district. Management has already started writing protocols. They're evaluating their processes. This new leadership team is meeting regularly to try to look at these things. They're participating in the various negotiations that are taking place. So this is really very helpful. They are going to have some comprehensive documentation, and a new change is that the superintendent is formally signing all of the agreements, whereas previously that did not always happen. The agreement content requirements was another area. We really wanted to have content requirements or standard language for these agreements and make sure that there's enough detail for everyone who picks up the document and reads it, really understands what's in it. There has already been detailed content requires established, some standard language and some templates to make sure that appropriate detail will be included to facilitate for all users of the documents, because these are documents that might be from a kind of a staffing perspective, but in finance, that same document would need to be used in order to figure out how much something might cost if there's a cost associated with it, or a leader from an implementation standpoint would have to understand. And we will ensure that one of the plans is to periodically look at the requirements and modify as they need to. The financial impact was a real big concern, especially expressed by the monitor, to make sure we have a consistent and comprehensive process to calculate what is the impact of any type of relationship, and making sure that that's clearly documented and captured somewhere. And finance is taking the lead. They'll have a team to really have a process for calculating the contractual agreements and determining those financial implications, make sure it's clearly documented and kept in one location or in a very common location. So there's no question when budget comes, they can pull out the report and say, okay, this is the number for the budget, and know that everything is appropriately budgeted and accounted for. Human capital also is looking to facilitate this process and making sure that they are clearly understanding when their financial implications, those are clearly documented and communicated before an agreement is executed. Under additional payments, we really want to make sure that what is in our PeopleSoft system is accurate, that aligns with the terms, that there's consistency across those terms. That'll be facilitated. Shared responsibility, again, with finance and human capital to make sure that calculations are accurate, that there's a handoff between the two departments, and everyone is consistent on what the cost is for these types of agreements. The centralized repository is always great so that there's one location. When initially Dr. Jallo had requested copies of the agreements, there were multiple emails sent to her, piles of, there was a big stack of emails with a few in each. And while the effort was there to be complete and to share all of that information, it really would have been great had there been one centralized repository available that they could have either gave her a link or a particular file or a location to get these files, instead of counting, maybe 10 different emails with lots of documents attached to them. So that's something that needs to happen. It also needs to have a check-in with the unions to make sure that what management believes are their full set of agreements. It is also what the union believes. I know that that step was something that we would more common do in an audit, but we did find out that there were actually differences identified. And it was just sometimes different things happened when you had an inconsistent process. Sometimes one group might have information and another group does not. But a reporting and verification process will work with the union, will be in place for the unions. They will look at what they can do for an electronic repository. Because we spent so much time in my shop just creating a linked spreadsheet with attributes and information, we did share that with management. So it is actually in the staffing team, as well as there's one available from a financial perspective, so that what we did do can be shared. We're not saying that's the easiest or most efficient way to do it, but that was our way of really capturing all of this information. So we freely shared that, so that, you know, for the time and effort it took us to do it, we were happy to share that with management and let it be a tool for them. But there will be hopefully a long-term solution that is going to have reporting associated with it that they can use. In addition, there needs to be true analysis across the various agreements by type, by different attributes, maybe by the number of people or classes or whatever, just to consolidate all of the information in these various agreements to ensure it's really centralized and understood, and that customizable reporting can come through. So we're really looking for and identify types of characteristics that might be helpful for analyzing this data. We were hoping for a formal communication process to ensure that there's operating guidance, so that in the event there was something that was agreed upon for principals, for their various teachers, let's ensure that there's operating communication and guidance that says, here's what has been agreed to, this is what needs to happen to comply. We want to just formalize some of those procedures so that they're not informal, and that is just what the hope was for this recommendation. Under the contractual bargaining agreements, we want to make sure that the financial impact across some of the paragraphs. Certain paragraphs, there's no financial impact, but there are some things within various agreements where it's like, okay, if you read this paragraph, it is saying that it's going to pay certain people a certain amount of money for doing something. How big a group is this? Who's tracking the various information to figure out what some of these terms mean and what is the impact of them? So finance is actually getting a work group to kind of comb through the agreement, identify some of those key things, as well as the staffing team. And they're going to work in collaboration with the staffing relations team to really look at different facets of those contracts and make sure there's just an understanding. It's not suggesting there's anything wrong with the agreements or anything at all. It's making sure that we and that management has an opportunity to see what has been agreed to so that we can plan and budget much more effectively. The last is, well, we actually have one more after this, but parameter specificity. There have been times where we're reading agreements or terms and we really can't figure out, what does this really mean? And that some of it is subject to interpretation. And I think this one's a little tricky because when you're dealing with this type of work, some clarity, you can't always put all the clarity and make it crystal clear in some cases because they're negotiated terms. However, at the same time, we really are looking to have an increased specificity as much as we can. I do see you, Vice President Elliott, but I'm going to get the slide done and then I'll get to you. Just to make sure that there's real clarity around what is it that has been agreed upon and what has not. Vice President Elliott? You're muted. Is that an old hand, Vice President Elliott? I'm not sure, but she's muted. I can't hear her.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry about that, because I was going back through the document as you were talking, because I had highlighted a number of things, but for the brevity, but for time's sake, what I will just ask is the board's role in this. First of all, let me just say, I'm clear now in terms of what Dr. Jallo was referencing with regard to MOUs and MOAs as it relates to collective bargaining agreements. I just did not know that we had MOUs and MOAs for those things that are described in the report. I could be wrong, but I don't remember having those conversations about those specific things that were delineated in the report. However, having said that, what kind of criteria does the board need to put in place to ensure that the MOUs and MOAs are in line with our budget, you know, that there is some financial impact that is determined. Although I did see in the report from management's response is that you may not always be able to have a financial impact, be able to determine what that financial impact is. But it also, another piece for me, in addition to financial impact, is what is the academic rate of return for us entering to these collective bargaining agreements with teachers or administrators. So that's what stood out to me right now. I did, like I said, I went through the entire document and I put comments in there, but for the sake of time, can you respond to that, or somebody from the administration respond to my inquiry?
Well, I would like to just clarify a little, and it was very much in the first recommendation. I did have an opportunity yesterday actually to sit down with Superintendent Myers-Small to go through the report and some of the content. And I know she very much wanted to be present for this particular review. But I know that if there's anything that would require a response from her, I assured her that the board would be happy to receive and give her the opportunity to respond in those cases. But in this particular case, what you're referring to is really a lot of the first recommendation. Specifically, Dr. Miller and I are going to provide a considerable amount of information, I guess, or data, so that the board would have some options as to what you'd like to see, if it would be financial parameters, if it would be something along the lines of the number of individuals impacted, or different variables that would be associated with the data. So we were going to do a little bit of data mining and information gathering, so that as the board can determine what makes sense for the board, we can provide some content and some structure around what could happen, so the board can feel comfortable and have a handle on the types of things that should be reviewed to ensure that you're engaged on this type of information. As it relates to the financial implications and the various impacts that are here, the various recommendations in the report, and management was somewhat aggressive in ensuring that they will be quickly implementing some of these items to ensure we're really are quantifying some of these financials. Now, something long-term would be really looking through the contractual agreements, because they have been around for a long time, some of the clauses, and they're very voluminous. So that is more of the long-term project. But for any agreements that are coming up right now, they're formalizing that process and truly costing those things out. And actually, Dr. Jallo is invited at that staff and relations meeting as well. So they will have that content. So some of that assurance will be greatly improved by the recommendations implemented.
All right,
You're welcome.
thank you.
Commissioner Powell.
I think Commissioner Malloy's hand was up ahead of mine.
Oh, you know what? You have a background and it's still like it's flushed in the background. No problem.
Okay, thank you. I have two questions. Back on the slide regarding staff relations reporting to human capital instead of legal. I just need more explanation, perhaps, or clarity on that point. Why is that, or what's the history there?
So I can speak to that, Commissioner. In many school districts, including in school districts our size, and it used to be the case in Rochester, labor relations, staff relations is a function within the Office of Human Capital. And it was recently. It's an area of work that was part of my previous employment in another district, fell under this. And we made the shift to staff relations to actually put more attention and focus on what we're doing with labor and how we're thinking about how we value, care for, respect, and work with our staff, in addition to the unions that represent them.
Thank you for that. And then I just have another question for Anissa. Thank you, Dr. Miller. I guess my other question that I have is just regarding the MOAs and MOU contracts. Do we have any current MOAs or MOUs that have not been signed from prior years or from our prior superintendent?
I am not aware from the items that we received from our, well, over the last 5 years, what we would have received is like a group of agreements that might have happened under Superintendent Dean Williams. And then we saw a few of them that came in or that were created under Superintendent Dade. And so it depended upon kind of who was, but I don't recall in my data. I will go back and check and verify it, but I do not recall seeing any unsigned agreements that we had. Now, there could be other items that are pending that would be sitting in the current staffing relations group, but I don't recall seeing that in my data, but I will go back and confirm that to you.
Right. I'm definitely interested to see if there are some existing contracts that are still pending. Certainly ones from under Dade's administration. And I would like to know the reasoning or rationale for why those haven't been signed. But also, are we still honoring those that have been signed by prior superintendents? Legally, are we required to honor those?
I would think that Council, Steve, are you still on?
Yep, I'm here. To the extent that the MOAs don't sunset, then generally they have an ongoing obligation. Oftentimes they're either incorporated into future collective bargaining agreements, which is a common practice. They're sometimes used as a bridge. Many of the ones that I think that Anissa is referring to were for individual circumstances, and there is really not much of an ongoing obligation. There's a few probably that have an ongoing obligation, but many of them were for a stipend for a period of time for a person, a makeup payment for time work that wasn't paid, settlements of grievances, things like that. But as far as specific ones and whether or not there's legal obligations to go, to continue with those, I think I'd rather talk about those in closed session, given that it's, legal advice and also collective bargaining potentially. But that's kind of the answer I can give you for the moment.
And I guess what is a general timeline that administrators could expect, like answers on these types of signatures occurring on an MOA? What is the general timeline, or what is a reasonable timeline for our administrators to wait on those?
Administrators? What are we talking about?
Just to have the agreement signed, what is I guess a reasonable amount of time for those who've put those in to have to wait to have the signatures? What's the timeline, the process?
Administrators don't get to put MOAs in. MOAs and MOUs are individually negotiated between.
Gotcha. So I didn't mean to say administrators, so I don't know the terminology. I'm just a teacher, right? But perhaps you could tell me, what is the general timeline from the time that one of those is submitted to when it's approved?
So we did actually capture that data within our audit. I can gladly get that and send that out to you. So you can see the timelines that have happened. Of course, that's historical information. It does not speak what the current team is doing.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Commissioner Powell?
Okay, so I had two questions also, and I think that for the most part, my second question was answered as part of the answer to Commissioner Malloy's. Of the total number of MOUs, MOAs, I heard Mr. Carling say that there are generally no sunsets, but of the total, how many of them are became functionally obsolete because the purpose is no longer needed, or the individuals with whom those were negotiated is no longer in play?
I would have to get back to you through the data that I have. I would have to comb through the various agreements to say these are no longer valid. I believe one of the areas we did try to read the agreement and then map out what affected 2015-16, what affected 2016-17, what is ongoing. So we actually have that content, and I can certainly share that information with you.
So to the extent that, as Mr. Carling said, the terms are often rolled into the next collective bargaining agreement, doesn't it make sense to identify those that are no longer functionally in play or functionally relevant, if they've been replaced by collective bargaining, you don't want to be keeping track of 211 or however many MOU, MOAs, right? Especially if they've ceased to be standalone agreements and they've been rolled into a collective bargaining agreement. You need to be able to say, and this is done, and close the book on it, right?
While I understand your point and it's a valid one of the things we're asking for in the specificity we're looking for is to, and I also had this dialogue with Superintendent Meyer-Small, looking for sunset dates on agreements so that there is that clarity that you're looking for. That hadn't been a historical practice, but the desire is to, while some are naturally going to end as a result of the terms, there are some that won't have that clarity. And so that's one of the things we're looking for. And it sounded like that's something, I'm not speaking for her, but it is a comment that she made that is something she was concerned about.
Okay. And my other question is this. So we know that collective bargaining agreements, the board does not approve the agreements proper. We only approve the financial impact of collective bargaining agreements. But if MOUs and MOAs are essentially extensions or addendums to the collective bargaining agreement, doesn't it therefore make sense that the board should be approving any of these MOU, MOAs that have financial impact? Isn't that something that should be assessed at the front end when these MOU, MOAs are being negotiated?
Let me provide some guidance on that point. To the extent that they exceed, so you delegated the superintendent a $35,000 contract signing authority. To the extent that they would exceed that, they come to the board. In fact, the board has approved MOAs in the past when we know that they're going to have values or anticipate them having values more than $35,000. So that's kind of the way they're viewed. And so some MOAs have been brought. And a lot of them don't have values anywhere near that amount, and that's why you wouldn't see them. So once the CBAs are in place, then an MOA is really viewed in essence as a contract, and it's balanced in that way. Now, certainly the board can decide to approach that in a different manner. At the moment, that's the guidance that's out there. That's kind of the way it's been viewed, but the board could, upon the recommendation of the auditor or just on its own, decide to lower the threshold or have a different perspective on how to view MOAs versus other contracts. And I believe that a report of you all get a quarterly report of contracts under $35,000. A reasonable extrapolation could be something like a report, quarterly report of MOAs or something similar. So that you're at least aware of what's happening out there. Those would be, those are all possibilities that we could put on the table for discussion, certainly.
And I think I'm sorry. So as we work with Dr. Miller, we were going to pull content. So you would have information about the types of information, the cost. You'll have better data to make an informed decision. So that is what our desire is, to put something in front of the board to help facilitate that conversation.
Well, and I would add, I wonder if it is the will of the board to have, well, let's call it a policy, for lack of a more appropriate definition, that governs the board's expectations around the financial impacts of MOAs.
Can I just interject? And I'm driving because I didn't realize you weren't finished, Commissioner Powell. Please forgive me.
Okay. I just want to tack an addendum to what I just said, to say that, like, I'm not a fan of creating policies just for the sake of creating policies, but as a direct result of this report, and the conversation about board expectations, now would be a really good time to put those expectations in writing. And whether it's the will of the board to actually, you know, put a policy number on it or not, I leave that to the body to discuss. But it seems to me that the hard work has been done. We just need to come up with a consensus on what practices the board wants to see put in place going forward.
I know Vice President Elliott is waiting, but in the spirit of collaboration, the one thing that Superintendent Myers-Small and I did discuss is the fact that she really had a desire for the first recommendation and the dialogue supporting what the board would need as far as support and which type of data we can give to the board for them to make an informed decision, that there be collaboration in that process. So I promised her that as we start going down this path, that I would bring up the fact that she's not here tonight, and this was very important to her to participate in the conversation. So I'm wondering if it's possible to either A, table it, or B, get that data that Dr. Miller and I are trying to put together so the board can make an informed decision, so that at the HR committee, as noted in the first recommendation in the response, all of the information can be there and everyone can be at the table, as so the board can make the informed decision about types of data, amounts, different values, because I think it would be very helpful if I gave you more data so that you can decide on what you would want. So I just want to make sure that when the board sets a protocol or a practice that they'd like to have happen, that it is kind of in alignment with what the data shows and what kind of things have happened over the 211 that I did review, so that when you do say, this is what I want, you'll know what the values are, the highs and the lows in these agreements, the terms, the types of things that are there. So I really want to provide that content so that you're in a stronger position to decide really what would make the board comfortable, if that would be okay.
So in the spirit of what you just said, and in the spirit of collaboration, couldn't the superintendent make a recommendation about what that procedure, those protocols, that policy, whatever we want to call it, is going to look like? And then the board can adopt from there.
That sounds great.
Thanks, that's all I have.
Thank you. Was there anyone else? Oh, Vice President Elliott, didn't you have something to say?
Yeah, but I think you basically shared what I was going to say to Commissioner Powell, because we talked about this in the beginning of the meeting. And to Commissioner Powell's point, the idea of considering a policy may be something that we can discuss in the meeting. But I'm also thinking that, to Steve Carlin's point about those contracts that are $35,000 and under, but even those MOUs or MOAs, I don't believe that they were a part of the contracts that were under $35,000, correct? None of that, those MOUs or MOAs that are part of the collective bargaining agreement were included in those quarterly reports that we get, correct? I don't remember seeing any specific names of employees that would have had an MOU or MOA.
You're correct, Vice President Elliott. It was not previously reported. Steve threw it out as a suggestion or a example of what could possibly happen, but it's not the current practice.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Are we all set? So that, for the most part, is the walkthrough. I just want to put out appreciation for Dr. Miller, Megan Abbott, out of the Human Capital Organization. They did a lot of work. Carlene and her shop worked really hard to support from a financial perspective. Their plate is full, but they were really coming to the table. And the new senior staff and relations team and the lift that they've taken on to really kind of make sure that there's a collaborative effort to cover all of the needs that are there. But that concludes my report on this audit. Commissioner Clark, would you like to go ahead and get a motion?
Okay, if all the questions are answered at this point in time, I would accept a motion to accept the Auditor General's Labor Relations MOA MOU report.
So move.
Get a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
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 Any
Aye.
opposed? Hearing none, thank you. The motion carried. So, I guess we have work status next.
Yes, I'll just go really quick because we started late and I do want to get folks out at a high level. We've done some student activity funds work. We're going back and taking another look at maintenance of effort for the 2021 year to see what's going on with our spending in special ed and see how that's going to impact us. We also are going back into contracts. I know the monitor did put down that there's a periodic review to make sure that there's some compliance in the contracts area. So we're doing that work as well. And the external audit is getting ready to start again. So a lot of the year-end work and efforts are taking place as well. That is in a nutshell. I know we started late, but I did want to make sure everyone can get out and make it to where they're trying to get to.
Okay, thank you for that update, and thank you for all of your hard work tonight and the hard work you always do. Our next audit committee meeting will be on October 26, 2021. And with that, I turn the gavel back over to you, President White.
Thank you, Commissioner Clark. The time is now 6:50, and I don't think there's any new business unless I've missed something. And then there is no reason. I haven't been notified that there's a reason for executive session. So without there being any new business or old business or the need to go into executive session, I'm going to call for a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Malloy. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Adams.
So do I have the record now?
What is that?
Do I have the record?
Oh, okay. Oh, so you've been here that long. You understand how this goes.
Right.
So Commissioner Clark.
We're gonna kick him off the board right now. He got to go.
Wait. You know, as they
Do we
said in that
have a
movie,
poll that we need to take?
challenge.
You got
There's
to
a
go.
challenge on the floor. There's a challenge on the floor. It is now 6:50. I do believe.
Wait, Van,
that means
do we have
all
to take
previous-
the poll? Do we have a
What's
survey?
that?
The survey?
Oh, Commissioner Malloy
Sorry.
trying to mess with you. She's trying to add some time. We'll do
I
this
know.
poll, and we'll see where you're at, Commissioner Clark. Let's hurry up and do this poll.
Okay.
Yeah, let me just take my time here.
All right. It is now 6:52.
I only have one response in right now.
Wow, you really
Okay,
are
now
taking it.
two.
down.
They're
They are
dragging
really-
it on. The questions are
Commissioner
not
Clark.
changing. You guys should be done with this by now.
Commissioner Clark, they are really messing with you tonight.
I know.
No, I was driving, so I had to take my time.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
We all
like
want it
it.
to be very deliberative.
Yeah. Okay, Vice President Allen. I think you're
believe
just trying
I'm
to hold
good.
on to that title.
I know.
Well, that too.
I have 6. We're all set.
We're all set. It's
Great.
6:53. I believe we have a new champion,
Thank
and
you.
that is Commissioner Clark. He ain't been here but what, 5
Motion to
months?
kick Commissioner Clark off the board.
I don't hear a second, so we're gonna move. But that motion is moot. We're gonna move on to the motion
All
to adjourn.
right.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Move.
It's been moved by Commissioner Clark, seconded by Commissioner Paul. All those in favor, except
Aye.
Vice President Elliott, say aye.
Aye. Good night, everybody.
Aye.
Good evening.
Good night, everybody.